Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, think about this for a second. How incredibly easy is it today to just pull out your phone, order a physical product from literally across the globe, and have it sitting on your doorstep in a matter of days, or honestly, sometimes even hours? It's wild, but that level of convenience just feels entirely normal to us now. Well, today, we're going to unpack how that exact phenomenon, this profound, literal shrinking of time and distance, has completely rewired the center of global economic power. We traditionally think of geography as something fixed, right? Mountains don't just get up and move, and oceans definitely don't shrink. But as we'll see, modern technology is actively compressing our world, fundamentally altering who actually holds the cards in international trade, politics, and business. Let's dive right in. We often just naturally assume that the biggest, most disruptive technological innovations always start in wealthy Western nations, right? Silicon Valley and all that. Yet developing nations, take Kenya for example, completely leapfrogged outdated fixed landlines to pioneer modern mobile payment systems. And why do they do it? Honestly, out of sheer necessity. Wealthy nations were bogged down by billions of dollars already invested in legacy infrastructure, like those old copper phone wires. Kenya didn't have that old infrastructure holding them back, so they just skipped it. They jumped straight to the newest tech. People without electricity at home used centralized city hubs to charge up their phones, turning simple mobile phone credits into a highly functional digital currency long before Apple Pay or Venmo were even a thing in Europe or North America. It's absolutely brilliant.
And it's not just the flow of information or money either. We're talking about physical movement too. Just contrast a simple trip across the European continent. Decades ago, traveling from a small European town up to Norway would literally take days. For the average person, it was basically unthinkable. It was a massive, exhausting expedition that really only aid workers or a super dedicated few might ever undertake. But present day, you're looking at just a couple of hours on a budget airline. And this isn't just about personal convenience, it completely changes our human psychology. I mean, when that unthinkable expedition becomes just a casual weekend getaway, borders start to feel a whole lot more like mere suggestions than actual impenetrable barriers.
Which brings us to a really crucial concept, one that's absolutely at the heart of modern geopolitics. Academics call it time-space shrinkage. Now, the Earth isn't literally spinning slower or getting physically smaller, obviously, but rather every single invention that makes transport faster or communication more instantaneous radically alters our perception of the globe. A massive cargo ship that carries 10 times the containers it used to, or an internet cable laid all the way across the ocean floor, those make every corner of the world instantly accessible. Space and time, functionally speaking, have shrunk, and this dynamic compression draws all of us, you, me, everybody, into this tightly woven, fiercely competitive global network. The speed of all this is just staggering. Information flows so incredibly fast today that, to put it bluntly, if anyone sneezes in the White House, the globe knows about it within 2 minutes. Think back to the massive 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan. News of that catastrophic disaster actually broke globally on Twitter in roughly 2 minutes. 2 minutes for that information to cross the entire world. For younger generations, this instant transmission of reality is just completely normal. But historically speaking, it is an absolute shock to the system. Stock markets can crash, massive diplomatic crises can ignite, and entire global movements can be organized in the time it takes you to brew a cup of coffee.
Section 1. The Great Global Shift.
Let's look at the historical domino effect of global trade. Up until the 1500s, the Middle East was essentially the economic center of the world, serving as the crucial bridge for the ancient Silk Road. Then, driven by the massive steam engines of the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, that weight shifted heavily over to Europe. Fast forward to the post-World War II era in the 1950s, and the immense manufacturing capacity of the USA made it the dominant superpower. But today? Well, the arrows of global transport, tech manufacturing, and trade are overwhelmingly pointing toward Asia. And this isn't an accident. It's the direct result of an incredibly dense population, highly efficient manufacturing bases, and a rapidly expanding middle class that's actively pulling the center of economic gravity eastward.
Which leads us to our next section, China's grand global strategy.
To really see how a major player takes advantage of this rapidly shrinking world, we have to look closely at China. Now, while the West might view China as a rapidly developing nation currently gaining unprecedented power, the perspective from within China is fundamentally different. They view themselves as taking back the power that was historically theirs. It's seen as a return to the natural order, dating back centuries before what they consider a long period of foreign interference. So, following the Communist Revolution in 1949, a massive 100-year vision was set. By 2049, their explicit goal is to reclaim their position as a dominating global force. It is a century-long, highly calculated strategy of historical restoration, not just rapid expansion. And the primary engine driving this incredibly ambitious 100-year plan is what's known as the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI. You can essentially think of it as a massive, modern-day Silk Road. The strategy involves heavily investing in and fundamentally securing crucial trade routes, marine corridors, and key logistical hubs all across Europe, Asia, and Africa. For example, Chinese state-owned enterprises now hold a controlling stake in the absolutely vital port of Piraeus in Greece. That gives them a massive, direct gateway straight into Europe. So China isn't just building one long highway here. They are funding a vast network of interconnected global infrastructure projects to literally pave the roads that global trade will travel on for decades to come. Now, how exactly do they secure these critical sovereign assets? Well, it happens through a mechanism that geopolitical analysts often call the debt trap. Here's how it works. Developing nations often desperately need modern infrastructure right now just to be able to compete globally. But traditional institutions, like the World Bank, usually require heavy bureaucracy, really strict environmental regulations, and years of red tape. So Chinese banks step in. They lend the money with far fewer rules and a much, much faster timeline. They build the massive infrastructure. However, these loans often come with higher, much riskier interest rates. So when the debtor nation inevitably struggles to pay that interest, their debt just compounds. Eventually, with absolutely no other options to clear the ledger, the nation ends up handing over outright ownership or maybe a 99-year lease of that sovereign asset directly to Chinese entities.
Let's shift gears a bit. Our next section, following the foreign investment. Because, you see, it's not just nation-states exploiting the shrinking, borderless world. Massive corporations are doing it too, primarily through something called foreign direct investment, or FDI. This happens when an external party buys stocks, issues massive corporate loans, or directly sets up shop in the economy of a totally different country. In our hyper-connected reality, corporate investors are literally always hunting for the most efficient path to profit. They can seamlessly seek out countries with fewer environmental regulations, lower corporate taxes, or maybe a highly educated but cheaper labor force. This exact dynamic is what drove the massive boom of call centers and complex IT support hubs in India over the last couple of decades. To put this into perspective, let's look at the Netherlands, a major European financial hub. Their top foreign investors are North America, Asia, and the UK. We're talking billions of dollars crossing the border every single year. But there is a pretty significant catch when you look closely at these FDI numbers. A vast amount of this foreign money doesn't actually build any new factories, and it doesn't create local jobs. A lot of it flows right into what are known as letterbox firms. These are essentially just legal addresses, literally just a mailbox in an office building somewhere, used by massive corporations to legally route their money through the Netherlands. Why? To take advantage of highly favorable tax treaties. It makes the national GDP look incredibly strong on paper, but it offers virtually zero actual employment for the local population.
That brings us to our final section. Who controls global trade? There is a really crucial structural shift happening right now in the global corporate world. And it's the evolution from a multinational corporation, an MNC, to a transnational corporation, a TNC. So historically, a multinational company would expand by, say, opening a factory in Poland or Turkey. And they would legally own that factory. Because they own it, they're entirely responsible for it. They bear all the legal, environmental, and financial liability. But modern transnational corporations, they operate very differently. They realized that owning physical factories was just way too risky and way too expensive. So like a lot of modern fast fashion brands or major tech hardware companies, they control massive networks of foreign subsidiaries and contractors without actually owning the factories outright. And this is both the genius and the profound danger of the transnational model. Because time-space shrinkage provides absolutely instant digital communication, a corporate headquarters in New York or London can rigorously dictate every single thing a foreign factory does. We're talking what materials they use, what exact standards they must meet, and precisely what razor-thin margins they'll be paid. They wield absolute power over the supply chain. But, and here is the kicker, because the factory in Bangladesh or Vietnam is technically a separate independent contractor, the TNC assumes zero legal responsibility if a labor violation occurs or if an environmental disaster happens. They perfectly coordinate the global operation to keep the massive profits while entirely dropping the risks. So as our world continues to shrink, these massive transnational corporations are increasingly able to operate completely across and frankly above national borders. They are directing global wealth, dictating labor markets, and influencing international policy, often without answering to any single government's legal system. I mean, some of these entities now have annual revenues that completely dwarf the GDP of entire developing nations, which leaves us with a critical, really provocative question from geopolitical theory. Will these borderless companies soon hold more actual power than the countries that host them? Are we looking at a future where they eventually make the traditional nation-state entirely obsolete? It's a massive question and one that will undoubtedly define our future. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope it gave you a powerful new lens to view our incredibly shrinking world.